This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A young man gradually losing his ability to move his muscles got a meeting today with Manitoba's health minister. He's pleading for the government to pay for his treatment. As the CBC's Ian Fraze reports, he says time is running out.
Jeremy Bray is arriving for a meeting. The journey took him nearly 3 hours from his home in Rivers, but he would travel any distance to get this chance.
Hi, Jeremy. Hi. Or is it Mr. Bray?
Jeremy's fine.
Nice to meet you.
The outcome of this meeting with the health minister will help decide whether he can control his body again. The 29-year-old has spinal muscular atrophy, a disease that's caused his muscles to waste away. All he can really move now is his mouth and his left thumb. This disease can be stopped with the right treatment, but Manitoba refuses to pay. Without the treatment,
It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that within 6 months, he may not have the ability to drive his wheelchair. Or work.
the meeting lasted 30 minutes longer than scheduled.
The minister was very receptive to our concerns.
Although the province still isn't willing to spend about $300,000 on the drug called risdiplam, the NDP government is asking Canada's drug agency, which is in charge of drug policy, for an urgent review. Right now, the agency doesn't recommend risdiplam for those older than 25 because of a lack of evidence. Manitoba follows the agency's advice, but Yazoma Asaguera wonders if that guidance should be changed.
What I've heard from some experts is that there is a real-world evidence that should be factored into decision-making in terms of recommendations. So I've made that ask to the CDA.
Bray is appreciative, but says he needs a drug now.
We really don't know how long the CDA process should take.
His parents say it's tough, knowing other provinces provide the hugely expensive drug without waiting for the agency to change its mind.
It's painful.
It's painful watching him go from being able to do things to be down to the strength of his thumb, running his life. So, but we're hopeful. We see people getting it, so we're hopeful that someday he will have it too.
Holding on to that hope is hard on others.
The community of Rivers, and I think Westman as a whole, is behind him. And so I'm sorry this is tough, but he's about the same age as me. And so listen, we need to get some action on this issue.
Jeremy says the tough part now is to wait, even though his time is limited. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
We're learning more about an alleged bid rigging scheme that took place over a number of years in and around Brandon. It involved 5 contractors and Manitoba Housing renovation projects. Search warrant documents obtained by CBC News are shedding light on the investigation. This comes as the accused are asking the courts to throw out the charges. The I-Team's Caroline Bargout has that story.
In late December 2022, prosecutors charged 5 Western Manitoba contractors with fraud, alleging they manipulated 89 government contracts valued at $4.5 million between December 2011 and February 2016. The contracts were to renovate, repair, or refurbish Manitoba Housing apartment suites. Investigators accused the contractors, Jeff Gregoire, Guy Pringle, James Koch, Ryan Lamont, and Doug Gunnarsson, of working together to place bids and control who would be awarded the contracts. The contractors are charged with conspiracy to commit fraud over $5,000 and with conspiring to allocate contracts. Keldon Bester heads up the advocacy group called Canadian Anti-Monopoly Project. He says these allegations are quite serious. If convicted, the men face fines or even jail time.
It becomes not about competition, but more about these actors, with no public input, deciding who should go first and ensuring that from their perspective, they get, a fair cut.
Manitoba Housing hired an external company in early 2015 to look into contracts after finding dozens of bids by local businesses that were concerning. After the review, the government took the findings to the Competition Bureau, an independent law enforcement agency. This is one of the Manitoba Housing buildings the search warrant documents say the contractors bid on, but that their bids were higher than they should have been, so they were asked to resubmit lower bids. But even with those lower bids, a Manitoba Housing representative was quoted as calling them out of whack. Shannon Saltarelli is the housing coordinator for the city of Brandon. She wasn't involved in this case and couldn't comment on it, but said the need for affordable housing in the city is great, and there's only so much money to go around.
It hurts the people that are living there and needing that space and needing that support.
The contractors are now trying to have the charges against them dropped, arguing that the investigation has taken too long. It began in 2015, and they weren't charged for 7 years. A judge will hear their case next month. Caroline Bargood, CBC News, Brandon.
The Premier was in Brandon today for the start of Ag Days. Wab Kinew says he and other premiers are continuing to work together to remind politicians in the U.S. that the trading relationship is crucial, particularly in the agricultural world.
North Dakota and South Dakota have a lot of influence in the new administration. And so us just continuing to make that case with our partners and friends south of the 49th parallel and saying, listen, energy, agriculture, manufacturing, you name it, as long as we can continue trading with one another, it's good for our jobs, it's good for your jobs, it's good for our cost of living, it's good for your cost of living too.
Kinew also announced the opening of 2 new agricultural services centres in Virden and Shoal Lake. The province says this year it's going to freeze electricity rates. The billboards are already out, but as the CBC's Ian Fraze reports, those ads aren't accurate.
Manitoba's government might be getting ahead of itself. All over Winnipeg, the province is boasting about a hydro rate freeze that started in January, like on these billboards. But these advertisements are misleading. The government promised to freeze electricity rates for 1 year.
Great news, folks. Manitoba Hydro is freezing hydro rates for 2025.
But that's not guaranteed. Manitoba Hydro says it won't ask for a rate increase for this year, but it's the Independent Public Utilities Board that has the final say on the price. It determines the price you pay, not the government or Hydro. And this promoted freeze didn't start in January. The last time electricity rates increased was last April.
I think from our client's perspective, I guess it is a little bit confusing to see, a hydro rate freeze being announced when that authority, in fact, rests with the Public Utilities Board.
Katrin DeLay speaks for the Consumers Association, which likes that electricity rate setting is done independently.
There are questions as to whether the 0% is the right rate at this point in time. And that's certainly why our clients would strongly advocate for an evidence-based public process.
But with Hydro's fiscal challenges like nearly $25 billion in debt and the need to spend billions to boost generating capacity, the opposition Progressive Conservatives are worried.
A rate freeze today could mean a rate shock tomorrow, and Manitobans deserve to know how much of a rate increase they should expect in 2026 and 2027.
Meanwhile, the NDP government is still treating a rate freeze as a certainty.
We're committed to making life more affordable for Manitobans.
Manitoba Hydro will submit its next rate application to the Public Utilities Board before the end of March. The board's ruling will determine the rates for the next 3 years. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
CBC weather specialist Riley Laychuk is in now. And Riley, I kind of feel like I'm living on the edge today because I forgot to plug my car in when I got to work today. So we'll see what happens after the show, but it is warmer than yesterday.
I walked, so I guess I can't give you a ride. A little bit of wind and a little bit of snow across southern Manitoba today. We have seen some of that blowing snow, especially on this Highway 75 corridor. We did have some whiteout conditions reported earlier in the afternoon. Again, doesn't take a lot of snow to whip up some of this when you get some wind gusts, particularly at about 50 kilometers an hour, which we have seen throughout the afternoon hours here in southern Manitoba. That's prompted a blow blowing snow advisory for the Red River Valley, Emerson, Morden Winkler, along the Perimeter Highway into the South Basin of Lake Winnipeg. So we are looking at some gusty winds this evening, tapering off as we get through the overnight period. Minus 14 tonight, northwest winds 10 gusting to 20 tonight. Still light winds tomorrow morning. We start at minus 18, so falling as we get into the morning hours. In Brittany, we're at minus 19 tomorrow afternoon. Bit of a roller coaster. I'll have more on that when I come back.
Thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
Well, outdoor enthusiasts and insurance companies are urging snowmobilers to be extra careful. Speed was the leading contributing factor in the 12 fatalities in Manitoba since 2021. Alcohol impairment and lack of helmets and experienced driving also factors. Manitoba Public Insurance and Snowman are reminding snowmobilers to be safe. They say riders also need to remember they're sharing the roadway. A long-standing city councillor has quit the mayor's inner circle. More on that right after the break. Winnipeg's mayor now has a vacant seat in his inner circle. Longtime member Councillor Sherry Rowlands unexpectedly resigned from the Executive Policy Committee today. CBC's Bartley Kivas reports.
Hey, Councillor. Sherry Rowlands has been a member of EPC since she was first elected to council in 2018. At least she was, until Tuesday afternoon.
I'm concerned about the provision of information to council, and I'm really concerned about the provision of information up through the public service to council.
Rowland says she's tired of being left in the dark about what's happening at City Hall, even though she has a seat at City Council's most powerful committee. Rowlands met with colleagues on EPC this morning, but didn't attend a scheduled meeting. About 25 minutes after that meeting ended, she sent the mayor a resignation letter. Scott Gillingham thanked her for her service and suggested a reason for her departure.
One of the things that perhaps we don't see eye to eye on is the way the city is responding to the provincial plan to end homelessness.
I made good. The province announced a plan last week to move people from encampments to Manitoba Housing. Winnipeg now plans to stop cleaning up encampments. Rowland says that decision was emblematic of a reason for resigning, but there are others.
We haven't had a police chief since Labor Day. There is no momentum, a second example, no momentum on the CAO search.
Councillor Janice Lukes, another member of EPC, says she enjoyed working with Rowlands, but says change on committees isn't a bad thing.
Honestly, I think it's good. It's a good circulation of experiences. I've had some good experiences on, some good off, not so good on, not so good off. So it's the nature of this job. It's a very intense, very, very high-pressure job.
Rowland's resignation leaves EPC mostly made up of Conservatives. It's now up to Gillingham to restore an ideological balance.
One of the things I appreciate about City Hall is, and especially around the EPC table, is there typically has been a diversity of voices. Around the council table, we know that many people have political cards in their back pocket, but, we work together to move the city forward.
The mayor doesn't have many options on the left to replace Rowlands. He punted Brian Mays from EPC last year and saw John Orlico resign. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipeggers are now waiting on average less than 2 minutes when they call 311. That wait is significantly reduced from 3 years ago when people were waiting more than 11 minutes. The city says it now has just shy of 100 full-time positions and more Winnipeggers are using the service. The city says more people have also started making service requests online. So this spring, the city plans to test using a chatbot and artificial intelligence on requests. A Winnipeg man says he got carried away when he drove an excavator into buildings and vehicles at a city water treatment plant. The 39-year-old pleaded guilty yesterday to several charges. Court heard the man caused more than $1 million in damage to the Deacon Reservoir facility in September 2023. 5 buildings were damaged along with backhoes, skid steers, and several employees' cars. Court heard the man did not deny damaging the facility, but blamed the fact the keys had been left in the excavator's ignition. The prosecution is asking for a 35-month sentence, while the defense wants 18 months. The judge overseeing the case has reserved his decision. A duo of Ukrainian immigrants in Brandon want to give the community a taste of their home country. They're opening Multi-Cook, a Ukrainian franchise offering handmade frozen foods. CBC's Chelsea Kemp has the story.
Fleeing the war in Ukraine, Oksana Golvika came to Brandon 2 years ago. While she's made a new life in the city, Golvika still misses her home country.
I so miss about this. I explain how it tastes, everything in Ukraine.
That's why she's teaming up with Katerina Dobashenka to bring a taste of the Ukraine to Manitoba. The pair are opening Multi-Cook, a Ukrainian franchise that makes homemade frozen food.
We bought it when we were in Ukraine, but it was not our plan. We visited our family, we just visited our Halia Pavlovna, everything, and bought this franchise. So actually we had a chance even have their training on the kitchen.
Golvika and Dubashenka met pinching perogies together to support Ukraine. They're members of Tries Up, a Ukrainian-Canadian group working to keep the culture alive in Brandon. Tries Up estimates about 500 Ukrainian families have moved to the area since the war began. Dobashenka says they hope Multi-Cook can help them feel at home in the Wheat City.
we're exciting to open our doors soon. Like we very strive with this idea to bring Ukrainian culture, traditions, while operating a successful business.
Golvika says she knows firsthand how important food is and feeling connected to home.
I miss it because I was struggle to find exactly our our traditional, our Ukrainian food, and it was so busy time. I didn't have a time to cook everything that I want by myself.
Multi-Cook is set to open next month. The women will be at the upcoming Westman Multicultural Festival in February to give people a taste of their offerings. Chelsea Kemp, CBC News, Brandon.
Riley, we could use some of those perogies to warm ourselves up after this chilly day.
Yeah, we'll get a little bit warmer as we get through the evening tonight, Brittany, and then we fall back down again.
Oh, okay.
So, briefly. We have an extreme cold warning. I know it kind of feels like we've kind of gone through a bit of a roller coaster here. We had some very cold temperatures, a little bit of snow, and now we have the extreme cold warnings returning again. This right now for Tadouli Lake, Gillam, Shamattawa, we're looking at wind chills as cold as -50 as we head into the morning hours tomorrow. This is frostbite on exposed skin in just minutes. So some dangerous cold in the north. We are looking at some chilly weather as we get through the next couple of days for Manitoba, for the south as well. Here's what's left of that weak area of instability that moved through the province as we got through the afternoon hours. Moving into northwestern Ontario overnight, maybe overnight we see a couple of more flurries across southern Manitoba. For the most part, we're done with it. Temperatures will rise a little bit through the overnight hours before we start to see things falling off again on the back here of another area of high pressure that'll clear us out and cooler temperatures down as we head through the day. So back to a mainly sunny sky by the time we head into the afternoon, maybe a little bit of thin cloud across the western side of the province. But as we head into Thursday, mainly sunny skies once again, not a lot to speak of through the day on Thursday, but it's what I'm watching as we head into Friday, which will put us onto that roller coaster yet again here. Some cloud builds in as we get through Thursday, and then we see some flurries moving through as we head into the day on Friday. So we're looking at a bit of an up and down, a couple of cold days ahead, and then we start to see our temperatures rising in earnest once we get through this area of instability into Friday. Really not looking at bringing all that much in the way of accumulations, but certainly as we get into the day on Friday, at least we're looking at some flurries, which I'll have more on in your long-range forecast. So winds on the back of this area of instability shifting back around out of the northwest. That will allow temperatures to cool down once again as we head into Wednesday. So by lunchtime, looking at winds in the west at least, northwest 15 gusting to 30, but some gusts sustaining 20, gusting 40 even into the Red River Valley. So we're looking at some breezy conditions once again, and that extreme cold warning in the north because of winds that we could see up to 50 or 60 kilometers an hour throughout the afternoon hours through the day on Wednesday. So here we go. Into Wednesday, temperatures drop to -19 by the morning after minus single digits today in the western side of the province, -18 first thing in the morning in Winnipeg, with the wind chill close to -30 once again, -19 so the next couple of days, Brittany, and then we're at -6 on the way for Friday, and a little bit of a warm up in your 7-day.
All right, thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
Here's a look at downtown Brandon as we head to break. We have more to come when we return. Stay with us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is promising a very strong response if the U.S. imposes tariffs on Canadian goods. President Donald Trump already suggested he could follow through on it by the end of next week. The CBC's Ashley Burke is in Quebec, where the federal cabinet is strategizing on how to deal with that threat.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning.
The Prime Minister says his cabinet's sole focus is stopping U.S. tariffs. But if Donald Trump doesn't back down, Canada will hit back.
Our response will be robust and rapid and measured, but very strong. The goal will be to get those tariffs off as quickly as possible.
To do that, Justin Trudeau says everything is on the table, even matching tariffs on U.S. goods.
I support the principle of dollar-for-dollar matching tariffs. It's something that we are absolutely going to be looking at if that is how they move forward.
Trudeau and his cabinet meeting again after a chaotic day. Trump originally signed an executive order saying tariffs could happen after a 3-month study.
We are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs.
But late last night, Trump threw Canada off kilter, musing to reporters he could impose a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods next week.
Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
When do you think you would enact those?
I think February 1st.
Canada's ambassador to the U.S. says bad abuser isn't how Canada would talk about its closest ally when it comes to border security.
It's part of an overall strategy, a bit of distraction, a bit of having people focus on a word that's being used and not on getting down to the work.
The industry minister says if Trump wants to bring in his golden age, he needs Canada to make it shine.
They understand, they're in the front line of that. They understand that they won't be tariffed without impact, they cannot be tariffed without consequences, and they cannot be tariffed without costs for the U.S. consumers.
If there is a trade war, Trudeau says the government plans on compensating Canadian consumers and businesses. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Montebello, Quebec.
An executive order signed by President Trump yesterday means the United States will recognize only 2 sexes that are unchangeable. The move is causing concern and worry from some 2S LGBTQ+ people here in Manitoba. The order requires the government use the term sex rather than gender. It also mandates all identification documents issued by the government, like passports and visas, only show as male or female. There are concerns over what that means for Canadians and those traveling. In Canada, you can self-declare with an X gender marker. The executive director of Trans Manitoba Inc. worries for the safety of people in the queer community and called the move frightening.
This rhetoric is really dangerous, and this misinformation condones violence towards non-binary, intersex, and transgender people. And it will lead to systemic discrimination and violence and deaths in the United States and possibly socially spill over into Canada.
Civil and human rights advocates and groups immediately vowed to protect minorities and challenge Trump's agenda. Trump signed several other executive orders on his first day in office, including some involving the U.S.-Mexico border that's already come into effect. Richard Madden has more on the orders and the implications.
Well, President Trump's emergency declaration along the southern border took effect at 6 a.m. local time here in McAllen, Texas, and it's business as usual, despite the fact that this emergency declaration unlocks resources and personnel from the military. The Trump administration channeling that there would be a show of force along the southern border. So officials here are waiting to see when and if that should happen in the next few days. Now, this is a southern border separating Texas and Mexico. It's about 30 feet high. That's about 8 feet. And it has been a cornerstone of the Trump campaign to secure the border, including this emergency declaration that was one of his first executive orders as commander-in-chief and president. Beyond the National Guard expected to be deployed here. We're expecting to see more surveillance cameras. We're expecting to see more of a show of force as this new administration takes into office. And with it are growing concerns by residents in this community that people that may have their paperwork here or undocumented immigrants who work on farms and in construction could be deported, and that could have a significant impact on the economy. There's also the political concerns that many undocumented migrants or people with their papers would be targeted and profiled. Listen to this.
There's a lot of fear. There's great concern. People are having to decide whether to go out on the street, whether to go to work. Tomorrow they've got to face up to whether they should take their children to school, and just genuine concerns that President Trump wants to carry through on his promise to engage in the largest mass removal of immigrants from this country.
And two other major executive orders signed by the president yesterday. Number one, he has canceled what's called the CBP app, and that was for potential asylum seekers to book appointments with citizenship judges in the U.S. That has been canceled. Their appointments have also been canceled along with it. Richard Madden, CBC News, McAllen, Texas.
Trump is also reinstating the Remain in Mexico policy from his first term. It requires some asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for their U.S. cases to be resolved. Now, two of the leaders of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol have been released from prison, their sentences wiped away by Trump on his first day back in the White House. Enrique Tarrio of the Proud Boys was serving a 22-year sentence for orchestrating a plot to stop the peaceful transfer of power after Trump lost the 2020 election to Joe Biden. Stuart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers was also freed. Trump has commuted the sentences or ordered the cases dismissed for more than 1,500 people charged for taking part in the riot 5 years ago. Israel and Hamas may have agreed to a ceasefire in Gaza, but fighting between Israelis and Palestinians has picked up in the occupied West Bank. CBC's Chris Brown has more from the ground.
No sooner did the ceasefire in Gaza kick in than Israel's military pivoted to Jenin in the occupied West Bank, launching what it called Operation Iron Wall, with a big military presence in the streets to target what it calls terrorist infrastructure. Fadi al-Sadi says his brother was shopping for bread when out of nowhere he was shot dead by an Israeli sniper. Jenin and its refugee camp are seen as a stronghold of armed groups aligned with Iran. Palestinian security forces have also battled them, but Israel warned its attack will be extensive. Not far away, Monday night, Jewish settlers attacked other Palestinian communities. It came just hours after Donald Trump removed sanctions the Biden administration had placed on violent settlers. With the fighting in Gaza paused, the fear of many Palestinians is that some in Israel's government are seeking to resume the war here in the West Bank. We spoke to top Palestinian official Ahmed Majdalani as the Israeli attacks on Jenin were unfolding. Israeli politicians have been inciting since the ceasefire to move the battle to the West Bank, he told us. Israel's main goal is to create chaos that will weaken the Palestinian Authority. The PA and Hamas are bitter rivals, both seeking to run post-war Gaza, but Israel says it will accept neither, without suggesting other options. That ceasefire not only freed 3 Israeli women hostages in Gaza, it also freed 90 Palestinians from Israeli jails, including activist Bushra al-Tawi. She spent 10 months incarcerated without being charged. She says Israel's Jenin operation is about weakening Palestinian resolve. Palestinian people are always under fire or being prosecuted or detained, she said. We do not want to submit. The Israeli raid on Jenin has effectively paralyzed the region, with checkpoints snarling traffic. Hamas issued a statement urging Palestinians to escalate their fight as the risk of yet more violence soars. Chris Brown, CBC News in Ramallah.
More than 70 people are dead and dozens injured after a fire at a ski resort in northwestern Turkey. The blaze that erupted in the middle of the night caused panic among the hundreds of guests staying there. Margaret Evans has more.
The fire began in darkness when most in the 12-story hotel would have been sleeping. Some survivors saying they were woken not by fire alarms, but by people shouting. The flames spread quickly. By morning, some of the upper floors were still on fire, and witnesses were trying to come to terms with what they'd seen. Omer Sakrak, who works at a nearby hotel, says it took a long time for fire trucks to arrive. During that time, people started to jump in panic, he says. There was nothing we could do. We just watched people jump like that. Others tied bed sheets together in the hopes of escaping. Mevlut Ozer, another hotel worker, describes it as an apocalypse. There were some extra beds on the first floor, he says, so we threw those down so people would fall on soft ground if they jumped. We saw people on the higher floors. All we could do was cry. The hotel is situated in a popular ski resort in Turkey's Bolu Mountains, and the fire has come in the middle of school holidays. Turkish authorities say there were 238 registered guests. An investigation is now underway, according to the tourism minister Mehmet Nuri Ersoy. There had been no report of fire safety concerns at the hotel before now, he says. Turkey has had a poor record of enforcing building safety codes in the past. 4 individuals, including the owner of the hotel, have reportedly been detained. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
Still ahead, a familiar face with deep ties to the Bisons is set to replace a legend at the helm of the University of Manitoba's football program. We'll introduce you to the new coach after this. The University of Manitoba Bison's football program will have a new head coach leading the herd this season. Longtime defensive coordinator Stan Pierre takes the reins from Brian Doby, who retired after nearly 3 decades with the team. Now, Pierre is no stranger to the Bisons either, coaching with them for 27 seasons. CBC's Gavin Axelrod caught up with him earlier this week.
I just didn't expect this to be the journey, and to be honest, I wasn't actively searching to be a head coach. If I was, you would have seen my name in many searches throughout my career here. That wasn't the case, but when it came the opportunity to become the head coach here, and I've been here for so long and so many years, I really believe that, I was the right person for the job. So,
what's the process look like for you to get to here today now that you're?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a lot of added work during the season trying to get prepared for that sort of stuff. But all in all, the interview process was basically just after the season ended, and all that was very enjoyable and a good experience. But during the season, yeah, it added a little anxiety and a little extra work for sure.
So you've been here for so long, on the staff, but so you talk about being anxious about waiting to find out where'd that anxiety come from?
Well, I mean, with change comes a lot of uncertainty, right? So, A, was I the one who was going to get the job? B, if I didn't get the job, then who was going to get the job? And then C, if somebody else came in to get the job, where does that leave me and the rest of the staff? So, yeah, there's always that uncertainty about when somebody new is coming in. And, I work in sports. I'm a competitive guy. If I decided I was going to put my name forward, I certainly was interested in winning the competition.
You get in here, what's your routine look like on a game day?
Yeah, I come in, I'm usually here as late as possible. I don't love to sit and stew before the game. It's quite nerve-wracking. So usually I'm breaking down our previous opponent, and I'm working on that until the latest possible moment.
Kind of, bonds are built in here between your players?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think we need to acknowledge the privilege that we have to have this type of facility down here for the guys to come in here and work out. But the majority of the time that these kids are here on campus and they're training for football, it's not the season, it's the off season. So it is the most important time of the year. This is where they gain the most in terms of their development.
It's also kind of unique, I guess, to this facility, right next door, you've got the Blue Bombers organization, which has such a high pedigree for winning. As a coach, are you kind of looking at some of the things they're doing and saying oh, maybe I could implement this here?
Certainly. I mean, there's no greater role model for us than looking across and seeing the type of success that they've had. And, a lot of that, our players can tangibly see what the other side of the rainbow looks like as well.
What do you want your legacy to be as a head coach here when, years down the line and you're ready to pass the reins on to someone else? What do you want that legacy to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the players that I've been involved with and the staff members that I've been involved with can look back and say, yeah, that he truly had our best interest in mind. He truly was making us better people, and he had a role in that, then that's good enough for me.
Riley is back, and Riley, I know that there's some pets that have been staring longingly outside, hoping today or tomorrow is the day they can go back outside with booties and maybe a jacket.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
You know what? This evening won't be bad, particularly if you're in Westman. We're actually looking at temperatures in Brandon, for example, warming up to -5 this evening.
Oh, okay.
Before falling back before we start the morning hours tomorrow. So a little bit of a falling temperature overnight once again. So this evening, not bad. But we're in for another cold couple of days, at least. So we'll talk about it. Here's your dog walking forecast. Tonight, I think Bronco is happy under the blanket for now. I know I would be, for sure. Thank you, Donna, for sending this picture in. You can send yours to talkback@cbc.ca. Yes, Bronco will need the booties first thing tomorrow morning if you're heading out for any length of time, really. We're looking at -18 first thing in the morning in Winnipeg, so not as cold as the last couple of mornings, and actually fairly seasonal for this time of the year to start the day tomorrow in Winnipeg. We're looking at wind staying light-ish. We'll start to see a little bit of a breeze once we get into the afternoon hours. Again tomorrow, -19 with a mix of sun and clouds through the day in Winnipeg, and then we're looking at -20 by the evening hours. So temperatures start to fall back once again a little bit towards seasonal as we get into the evening hours. Still stuck under this ridge of high pressure, although you'll notice it's shifted a little bit further to the east. So some of the coldest air in the country now over Ontario and parts of northern Quebec into Labrador. But this has been very far-reaching. You can see how far south this dips, and it's actually having impacts into the southern United States along the Gulf Coast, for example, where we have extreme cold warnings along the Louisiana coast, winter storm warnings through the Florida Panhandle, through Georgia, and up into the Carolinas. Looking at 10 centimeters of snow in places like Atlanta, and up to 15 centimeters of snow into southern Georgia, into Mississippi, into Alabama. So we're looking at some very snowy and very winter-like conditions. Not typical when you think of the Florida Panhandle, for example, but we are looking at some winter weather in the southern states, which is prompting those warnings. Not nearly as cold there as it is here, but certainly looking at some cold temperatures into parts of the United States. -19 overnight in Brandon, -12s, -14s through the Westman region, looking at temperatures close to -30 into northern Manitoba. Really looking at another cold one across the north tomorrow. Temperatures -24 under the sunshine by lunchtime in Thompson, -21 by the afternoon. In southern Manitoba, more of a cloudy start to the day, maybe a few flurries, particularly in the southwest corner. But as we start and get toward the lunch hour, we start to clear out. And even back to a mainly sunny sky, Brittany, by the time we get to the afternoon, -16 in Brandon.
Thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
From churches and community clubs to game rooms and basements, Dungeons & Dragons has a huge following. The role-playing game just celebrated its 50th anniversary, but while it's gained in popularity, it's not quite as controversial as it was when it first hit the scene. Filmmaking students in the Create program at Sisler High School explore the game's past and why it means so much to those who play it.
The game of Dungeons & Dragons has been around since the early 70s. It's played by an estimated 5 million people.
One critic of the game also feels that Dungeons & Dragons promotes Satanism.
There's a book called None Dare Call It Witchcraft, who said it's the most cleverly packaged presentation to the occult ever made.
My friend got called a cult leader by a teacher at one point in time. We never said Dungeons and Dragons or even D&D out loud when we were at a restaurant or something because we didn't know who might hear that. It's taken me years before I felt comfortable even saying those terms in an environment where not everybody was playing D&D.
The manufacturer makes some interesting notes on this. It warns the players not to get themselves confused with their character roles. And it says that the point of this game is not winning and it's not killing. It's having the adventure.
I certainly think it's ironic that I, as someone who is running a church ministry professionally, am using D&D when there was a time where the churches were the ones who were trying to get D&D out of people's lives.
Well, is there anything you want to do now that everybody's awake?
I hope that that shows that there are churches that are maturing in their understanding of what spirituality means and what spiritual threats really look like.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna switch your notebooks because I also have Ilya's notebook.
I definitely was, not to be cliche, but I was definitely like sort of figuring out where to go when the pandemic hit. Just based on the people I've met, it definitely changed me in that way because I would be totally different if I'd never met them.
After this ritual, we're kind of gonna be screwed though.
I really trust that those connections that people make with people older or younger than them through something like sharing stories through D&D, that can have impacts in relationships that go beyond just the party playing a particular campaign about dragons.
Horrible things I would do.
A year after I discovered D&D, my dad died, so I was just going into grade 9 at this point in time, and life went upside down, as it will. So I really don't know where I would have ended up if I had not had my group of friends and being able to escape into D&D every night.
In there, but before he gets to do that, you get an action. So what would you like?
You can.
So D&D lasting for 50 years just gives a common language that I am taking advantage of all the time.
There are the pros to being able to play in person, being around the table, sort of feeling that energy, but I think we've been able to do a pretty good job replicating it.
I've got a lot out of the community that I've been involved in. Long-term friendships. They're good friends. They're friends that will be there when you need them. But also just the day-to-day living and being out with people and doing something you really enjoy. So it's all been about the social connections.
Snow and blowing snow across southern Manitoba today, but how are teens dealing with the cold? We'll have that, plus Riley's last check on our forecast. Stay with us.
All right, time for a look at your 7-day forecast. So below seasonal for the next couple of days in Winnipeg. Watch for those northwest winds tomorrow. 20 gusting to 40, minus 19 for the next couple of days. We rise overnight into Friday morning with some flurries, minus 6 by the time we get to the afternoon. Then we're looking at minus 10 for Saturday. Again, another gusty one. Once we get through a little bit of instability, we'll get some wind on Saturday as we clear out through the day. Minus 7 for Sunday, minus 6 for Monday, and there's a little bit of a treat. Some light at the end of the tunnel, I think I can call it. A mostly sunny minus 1, which, by the way, is well above seasonal for this time of the year by the time we get into Tuesday. So there's something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's that roller coaster you were talking
exactly.
about.
Well, we've all seen it. A young person out in the frigid weather, not dressed for the conditions. Their jacket's open, if they even have one. Maybe they got sneakers on. No gloves, no toque.
We've all also done it. We wanted to know how they do it. So we sent CBC's Jim Agapito to talk to some of those young people about how they're doing in this cold snap.
Are you cold right now?
Oh, yes, I'm freezing.
Your jacket's open, though. Can you tell me why it isn't done up?
I was too cold to zip it up, so I just hid my hands.
Can you tell me what you're wearing right now?
A coat and regular clothes, so.
I see that you're not wearing gloves. Any reason why that was a choice?
I don't know. I just couldn't find any.
I've actually started wanting to wear a scarf soon.
I see what you're wearing. Are you not cold?
Yeah, somewhat actually. I'm still cold. My face is like frozen.
Okay, I gotta ask. An older generation thinks sometimes younger people like yourself are always ill prepared and not dressed for the weather. You're laughing. What do you say to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of times when I was younger, I was always ill prepared. But now that I'm getting older, I've started to realize that I need to be more prepared.
It's mostly true. I'm gonna be honest. It's true, honestly. It's true.
How well prepared are you for this weather?
I'm never prepared for this weather.
How well do you think you're prepared for this weather?
Very prepared.
And you're wearing a hoodie. You're not cold?
No.
What do your parents say when you leave the house like this?
My parents hate it. They're like, why don't you wear a jacket? I'm like, I don't want to wear a jacket.
Definitely gonna find my ski pants. I'm not walking in the cold like this.
Will you change what you're wearing for the next couple of days?
No, probably not.
Why is that?
I'm too lazy.
That is a battle every parent knows as those kids head out the door in the morning.
I feel them.
Slight reprieve coming for those parents and those kids, but for now, bundle up.
Exactly. Stay safe, stay warm.
We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.